The humble shop and the dragon child, the twin sons of Zarian Prime, cast their amber glow across the sprawling metropolis of Astralith, capital of the Draconic Empire. Crystalline towers stretched impossibly high into the violet sky, their surfaces rippling with bioluminescent patterns that spoke in the ancient tongue of the Dragonlords. Between these monuments to imperial power, a maze of smaller structures housed the countless beings who served the Empire merchants from 100 worlds, artisans whose skills had been honed across millennia, and laborers whose backs bore the weight of galactic civilization. Among them, tucked away in a narrow alley between a Zephyrian spice dealer and a Centaurian weaponsmith, sat a shop so modest it might have been overlooked entirely. The sign above the door read simply repairs in a dozen languages, though. The paint was faded, and the metal frame bore the honest rust of years. Inside, workbenches cluttered with tools from across the galaxy created a maze of organized chaos. Plasma welders sat beside traditional hammers, quantum calibrators shared space with simple wrenches, and holographic diagnostic arrays flickered next to oil-stained rags. This was the domain of Marcus Chen, the only human in a city of 10 million souls. Marcus had arrived on Zarian Prime 15 years ago. A refugee from the Outer Rim conflicts that had scattered humanity across the stars like seeds on the cosmic wind. Unlike many of his species, he harbored no dreams of grand destiny or heroic purpose. He asked for nothing more than the right to work with his hands, to take broken things and make them whole again. The Dragonlords, secure in their supremacy, had granted him this small mercy with the indifference they showed to all lesser beings. His customers were mostly the working class's maintenance crews who needed their equipment fixed, merchants whose cargo haulers required constant repair, servants from the great houses whose masters wouldn't waste coin on replacing what could be mended. They came to him because he was cheap, reliable, and asked no questions. In return, they paid him enough to keep his small apartment above the shop and put simple food on his table. Marcus had learned long ago that invisibility was survival. He kept his head down, his voice quiet, and his opinions to himself. The dragon-blooded nobility who ruled this world could end his existence with a thought, and he had no desire to give them cause. It's better to live as a shadow than to burn as a martyr. On the morning, that would change everything. Marcus was hunched over a malfunctioning atmospheric processor, his weathered hands steady as he replaced a blown capacitor. The device belonged to Crick, a mollusk engineer from the sewage treatment facility, and Marcus had promised to have it ready by midday. The work was routine, meditative even, requiring the kind of focused attention that had always brought him peace. The bell above his door chimed softly, and Marcus looked up to see a customer unlike any who had ever entered his shop. She was small, perhaps 7 years old by human standards, though her species aged differently. Scales the color of burnished copper covered her arms and face, catching the light with an inner fire that spoke of noble blood. Her eyes were the deep amber of ancient honey, wise beyond her years, yet bright with a child's innocence. She wore simple clothes, a tunic and leggings of fine fabric but muted colors, as if someone had tried to disguise her heritage through modesty. In her clawed hands, she clutched something that made Marcus's heart clench with recognition. It was a toy bear, small and brown, and thoroughly, heartbreakingly broken. One arm hung by a single thread, the other was missing entirely. Stuffing leaked from torn seams, and the button eyes stared blindly at nothing. The fabric was worn thin from countless embraces, faded from the deep brown it had once been to the pale tan of well-loved age. "Sir," the child said, her voice carrying the musical cadence of the dragon tongue, "can you fix Theodore?" Marcus set down his tools and moved to the front counter, studying the child with careful attention. Dragon-blooded nobility rarely ventured into the common districts, and never alone. This girl's presence here was either a miracle or a catastrophe waiting to happen. "Theodore," he asked gently, gesturing to the bear. She nodded solemnly, lifting the toy as if presenting a fallen warrior for burial. "He's been with me since I was very small. Mama gave him to me before she went to the stars." Her amber eyes glistened with unshed tears. "The servants say he's just junk now, that I should throw him away and get something new. But I can't. He's my friend. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a familiar ache that he'd thought long buried. He'd had a toy once, a battered wooden horse carved by his father's hands. It had been lost when their colony fell, consumed in the flames that had taken everything else he'd ever loved. He knew the weight of a child's grief. It was a particular pain of losing something that couldn't be replaced. "Let me see him," Marcus said, extending his hands. The girl hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed the bear on the counter. Close. The damage was even more extensive than Marcus had first thought. This wasn't the work of simple place. Something violent had happened to Theodore. Some catastrophe that had torn him nearly apart. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his fingers gentle as he examined the tears. "There was an accident," the child said, her voice small. "I was playing in the garden, and the security drones thought Theodore was a threat. They shot him." Fresh tears spilled down her scaled cheeks. "I know it sounds silly, but I tried to protect him. I threw myself on top of him, but it was too late." Marcus felt a cold anger rise in his chest, quickly suppressed. Security drones that would fire on a child's toy in the presence of the child herself spoke to a paranoia that had consumed the Empire's ruling class. But anger would solve nothing here. Only skill and patience could heal this wound. "I can fix him," Marcus said simply. The child's eyes widened. "Truly, even with so much damage?" "I've fixed worse," Marcus replied, and it was true. He'd rebuilt starship engines from component atoms, restored artifacts from civilizations that had fallen before humanity had learned to walk upright. A child's toy, no matter how damaged, is well within his capabilities. "But I don't have much money," the girl said, reaching into a small pouch at her belt. "I have 17 credits, and these." She placed a handful of small objects on the counter. Pretty stones, a few pieces of costume jewelry, a data chip containing what looked like children's games. Marcus looked at the pathetic collection of treasures, then back at the child's hopeful face. In that moment, he made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. "That's more than enough," he said, "but I'll need some time. Theodore is hurt badly, and healing takes patience. Can you come back tomorrow?" The child nodded eagerly. I'll wait as long as it takes." She paused at the door, turning back. "Thank you, sir. I'm Lee Riley." "Marcus," he replied. "And you're welcome, Lee Riley." After she left, Marcus locked the door and turned off the front lights. He cleared his main workbench and spread Theodore out under the bright examination lamps he used for precision work. The damage was extensive, but not beyond repair. He had fabric that would match, stuffing to replace what had been lost, thread strong enough to hold against a lifetime of embraces. But as he worked, something else guided his hands. Memory, perhaps? Or instinct bred into his bones by generations of ancestors who had known different trades but the same careful pride in craft? As he began the delicate work of restoration, Marcus found himself thinking not just of technique, but of meaning. This wasn't just a toy. It was a repository of love, a vessel for a child's dreams and fears and hopes. Every stitch had to be perfect, every seam a promise that some things, once broken, could indeed be made whole again. He worked through the night, his fingers steady despite his age, his attention focused with the intensity he'd once brought to diffusing quantum mines in the war. Piece by piece, Theodore took shape again. New stuffing filled out his form. Careful patches covered the worst of the damage. And slowly, patiently, the bear returned to something approaching his former glory. But as dawn approached, Marcus found himself faced with a choice. The repair was complete, functionally perfect. Theodore would serve his young owner for years to come. But something in Marcus rebelled against such simple competence. This child, this dragon-blooded noble who had trusted a stranger with her most precious possession dies served more than mere function. Moving to a cabinet he rarely opened, Marcus withdrew a tool he hadn't used in years. It was a quantum needle, capable of working at the molecular level, designed for repairs so delicate that they bordered on art. With it, he began to add something that hadn't been there before, a small marking, carefully worked into the fabric of Theodore's chest where a new seam had been necessary. The design was simple, elegant, carrying meaning that most would never recognize. But Marcus knew its significance, had worn its twin on his own skin before age and circumstance had made such displays dangerous. It was the mark of the Griffin, guard an ancient order of human warriors who had once stood against the darkness between stars. As the twin suns rose over Astraleth, Marcus completed his work. Theodore sat on the workbench, whole and proud, bearing his small mark like a badge of honor. The bear looked ready to face whatever storms might come, to stand guardian over a child's dreams for however long he might be needed. The Emperor's Eye, the imperial palace of Astraleth, was a marvel that defied both physics and aesthetics. A crystalline mountain that grew from the planet's surface like a living thing. Its walls pulsed with inner light, shifting through spectrums visible only to dragon eyes, while its spires reached so high that they pierced the cloud layer and scraped the edge of space itself. Within this monument to draconic power, 100,000 souls lived and worked and schemed. Astraleth, third daughter of Emperor Velthorn the Magnificent, raced through corridors that could have housed entire cities. Her scaled feet clicked against floors of polished obsidian, her amber eyes bright with joy as she clutched Theodore to her chest. The bear sat perfectly in her arms, as whole and solid as if he'd never been broken, his button eyes reflecting the palace's eternal light. Servants pressed themselves against the walls as she passed, bowing deeply to acknowledge her rank. Guards in ceremonial armor straightened to attention, their weapons gleaming with contained energy. But Lirelei saw none of them. Her world had narrowed to the miracle in her arms, and the need to share it with the one person who would understand its significance. The throne room of Emperor Velthorn occupied the palace's heart, a vast space carved from a single crystal geode whose walls contained galaxies of trapped starlight. The ceiling disappeared into infinity, and the floor was a map of the empire rendered in precious metals and living light. At the room's center, rising from a dais of black diamond, stood the throne of a Giza construction of crystallized dragon bone and captured starfire that had been ancient when humanity was still. Learning to make fire, upon that throne sat Velthorn himself, 300 years old and in the prime of his power. His scales were the deep purple of space itself, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with each heartbeat. His eyes were galaxies in miniature, containing depths that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. When he spoke, the very air trembled with barely contained force. He was currently holding court, listening to reports from across his domain with the patient attention of one who had learned that empires were built on details as much as grand gestures. Trade disputes from the outer rings, territorial adjustments in the core worlds. The endless diplomatic dance that kept 1,000 species in line, all of it flowed across his consciousness like a vast river of information. "Your Majesty," came a familiar voice from the chamber's entrance. Lirelei stood there, having somehow evaded the guards and protocol officers who should have prevented her intrusion. In her arms, Theodore gleamed with restored dignity. A ripple of consternation ran through the assembled courtiers. Children, even royal children, did not simply burst into imperial audiences. And his voice held both authority and warmth. "You know better than to interrupt court business. What is so urgent that it cannot wait for our evening meal?" The princess stepped forward, her courage undimmed by the weight of imperial attention. "Father, look. Theodore is fixed. The human in the market, he made him perfect again." She held the bear aloft. For a moment, the throne room's majesty was reduced to something simpler, a child showing her father a mended toy. And he leaned forward to examine Theodore with the same attention he'd given to reports of fleet movements. "Indeed he is," the emperor said. "You must thank this craftsman properly for his service to the royal house." "I will, father. I'll bring him honey cakes from the kitchen. And maybe some of those silver coins with your picture on them." Lirelei hugged Theodore close, then held him out again. "See how perfectly the seams match." And he even added something special. Right here on the chest. Velthorn's galaxy eyes narrowed as they focused on the spot his daughter indicated. There, worked into the fabric with skill that bordered on artistry, was a small symbol. To most observers, it would have seemed merely decorative, a stylized bird, perhaps, or an abstract pattern chosen for its aesthetic appeal. But Velthorn was not most observers. He was the heir to 3 millennia of imperial memory, the keeper of secrets that predated most star systems. And he recognized the griffin crest of the Terran Guard as surely as he recognized his own reflection. The silence that followed stretched for heartbeats that felt like eternities. Around the throne room, courtiers and functionaries began to shift uncomfortably, sensing a change in their emperor's mood but unable to identify its source. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with the kind of potential energy that preceded storms. Lirelei, Velthorn said, his voice carefully controlled. "Tell me about this craftsman. What did he look like? What did he say to you?" "He was very kind, father. Tall for a human, with gray in his hair and gentle hands. He said his name was Marcus. And he promised he could fix Theodore no matter how badly he was broken." Lirelei's brow furrowed in thought. "He looked sad when I told him what happened, but not scared. Most humans look scared when they see us." "Indeed they do," Velthorn murmured. His mind was racing, pulling together fragments of intelligence reports, historical records, and carefully guarded secrets. The Griffin Guard had been declared extinct 4 centuries ago. Their order dissolved and their members scattered to the cosmic winds. But legends died hard, and rumors persisted of survivors who had gone to ground, hiding their true nature behind mundane facades. A human craftsman who could work with such skill, who bore the ancient mark of the Guard, who showed no fear in the presence of dragon nobility. Such a being was either impossibly brave or impossibly dangerous. "Perhaps both, my lord." The voice belonged to Lord Chancellor Zephyrus, Velthorn's most trusted advisor. The elderly dragon's ice-blue scales betrayed his nervousness as he approached the throne. "Shall the first dismiss the court for today? You seem ... troubled." Velthorn considered the question. Around him, dozens of petitioners and officials waited for his attention, their own concerns seeming suddenly trivial. But an emperor's duties could not be set aside lightly, even for personal crises. "No," he decided. "We shall finish today's business. But send word to Captain Asterix. I want a full intelligence briefing within the hour." He paused, studying Theodore's cheerful button eyes. "And send an invitation to this Marcus. Tell him the Emperor would be honored by his presence at court." "Certainly, Your Majesty." "What reason should I give for the summons?" Velthorn's smile was sharp as obsidian. "Tell him the truth. We wish to thank him for his kindness to our daughter." As the afternoon wore on, Velthorn found his attention divided between the mundane business of empire and the implications of a griffin crest sewn into a child's toy. If Marcus was indeed what the symbol suggested, then the carefully maintained balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted in ways that would take years to fully understand. The Griffin Guard had been humanity's greatest military order. Warriors whose skill and determination had carved out an empire that once rivaled his own. They had been philosophers as well as fighters, engineers as well as soldiers, bound by codes of honor that made them both admirable and dangerous. Their fall had come not through military defeat, but through betrayal from within. Their trust in lesser humans proving to be their fatal weakness. But if even one true member of the Guard survived, if the ancient traditions had been preserved and passed down through the centuries of exile, then humanity was not the broken species the galaxy believed it to be. And that changed everything, the intelligence briefing that evening confirmed Velthorn's suspicions while raising even more questions. Marcus. Chen had arrived on Zarian Prime 15 years ago with documentation that was technically perfect, but somehow felt hollow. His skills were far beyond what his claimed background would suggest. And several pieces of equipment in his shop were of technologies that shouldn't exist outside. Imperial research facilities. He could be a spy, suggested Captain Asterix, head of Imperial Intelligence. A long-term infiltrator, preparing for some future operation, or it could be exactly what he appears, countered Lord Chancellor Zephyrus. A skilled craftsman, trying to live quietly in obscurity. The galaxy is full of beings with hidden talents and complicated histories. Velthorn listened to the debate with half his attention, his galaxy eyes fixed on Theodore, where the bear sat on a side table. The griffin crest seemed to pulse in the palace's eternal light, a reminder of a time when humans had stood as equals among the stars. "Bring him to me tomorrow," Velthorn decided. "Full diplomatic protocols, but make it clear that this is a request, not a command. If he truly is what I suspect, then compulsion will serve no purpose." As night fell over Astralith, Marcus Chen worked late in his shop, unaware that his simple act of kindness had set in motion forces that would reshape the galaxy. The griffin crest gleamed on Theodore's chest, a bridge between past and future, between broken dreams and impossible hopes, and in the palace. An emperor who had ruled unchallenged for 3 centuries prepared to meet a ghost from humanity's golden age. The empire trembles. The imperial palace had seen many momentous days throughout its long history, coronations that elevated dragons to godhood, treaties that carved up star systems like wedding cakes, declarations of war that sent fleets screaming across the void. But none had carried quite the electric tension that crackled through its crystalline halls as Marcus Chen walked toward his appointment with destiny. He came not as a prisoner or supplicant, but as an invited guest. The invitation had arrived at his shop the previous evening, delivered by a courier whose scaled hands trembled as he spoke the ritual words. His Imperial Majesty, Velthorn, the Magnificent, sovereign of 1,000 worlds, requests the honor of your presence at court. The parchment itself was a work of art, inscribed with flowing script that shifted colors in the light. Sealed with the imperial dragon in living flame, Marcus had read it 3 times, his weathered face betraying nothing of the storm that raged within. 15 years he'd lived in the shadows, content to remain invisible, forgotten by history and the powers that shaped the galaxy. Now, with a single act of kindness to a lonely child, he'd been dragged back into the light. The question that had kept him awake through the long night was simple. Had his cover finally been blown? Was this truly just about Theodore? He dressed in his best clothes, a simple black suit that had seen better decades, polished boots that had walked across more worlds than most beings would ever see, and a white shirt that was clean, if not precisely new. Around his neck, hidden beneath the collar, hung a chain that held his most precious possession, a medallion bearing the full crest of the Griffin Guard, forged from metals that had been refined in the heart of Sol itself. The palace guards who escorted him through the labyrinthine corridors were professionals, their movements precise and their weapons gleaming. But Marcus noticed the tension in their postures, the way their eyes lingered on him with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Word had spread, as it always did in places of power, that today's audience was somehow different from the routine business of empire. They passed through galleries where the treasures of 1,000 worlds were displayed like casual decorations, through gardens where crystalline trees sang in harmonies that human ears couldn't quite perceive, through chambers whose walls held holographic records of the Empire's greatest triumphs. It was a deliberate display of power and culture, designed to intimidate visitors with the sheer scope of draconic civilization. Marcus observed it all with the detached appreciation of a tourist, his mind cataloging defenses and exit routes with the automatic precision of old training. The palace was indeed magnificent, a testament to the dragon's mastery of both technology and artistry. But he had seen its like before, in the golden age when humanity's own capitals had rivaled the stars themselves. The throne room, he finally entered it, struck him with its calculated grandeur. The assembled court, hundreds of nobles, functionaries, guards, and hangers-on created a sea of scales and ceremonial robes that sparkled in the chamber's eternal light. At its center, rising like a mountain from the obsidian floor, the throne of ages commanded attention with the gravitational pull of a collapsed star, and upon that throne sat Velthorn himself. Marcus had seen dragons before, of course, during the war, on diplomatic missions, in the careful dance of commerce and politics that followed, but never had he encountered one quite like this. The Emperor radiated power not just as authority, but as a physical force, as if reality itself bent slightly in his presence. His galaxy eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of experience. wisdom bought with the blood of civilizations. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, human and dragon, survivor and emperor. Past and present meeting in a collision that sent ripples through the force itself. "Approach," Velthorn commanded, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "Let us look upon the craftsman who has rendered such service to our house." Marcus walked forward with steady steps, his bearing neither subservient nor challenging. He stopped at the prescribed distance from the throne, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to avoid seeming presumptuous. Around him, the court watched in fascination as a human assembled. Unremarkable, human commanded the personal attention of their god-emperor. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, inclining his head in acknowledgement, "I am honored by your invitation." "The honor is ours," Velthorn replied, studying Marcus with those impossibly deep eyes. "It is not often that we encounter such skilled craftsmanship. Our daughter speaks of you with great fondness." "The princess is a remarkable child," Marcus said carefully. "It was my privilege to help her indeed. You took a broken thing and made it whole again. Such skill is ... rare." The Emperor's emphasis on the last word was subtle but unmistakable. "Tell us, Marcus Chen, where did you learn such techniques? Your work shows a mastery that suggests formal training." The question hung in the air like a drawn blade. Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of watching eyes, the pressure of a moment that had been building for 15 years. He could lie, continue the masquerade that had kept him safe for so long. Or he could trust in the code that had once made his order great. That truth, however dangerous, was preferable to dishonor. "I learned from the best teachers available to me, Your Majesty. Life has a way of providing education to those willing to receive it." It was a diplomatic non-answer, the kind of response that revealed nothing while technically addressing the question. But Velthorn was not satisfied with diplomacy. "Life, yes. But not just any life." The Emperor leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow carried clearly throughout the chamber. "Show them, Marcus Chen. Show our court what you truly are." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Somehow, impossibly, his secret was known. The careful construction of years had crumbled in the face of imperial intelligence. And now he stood exposed before the most powerful being in the galaxy. He could feel the tension in the room ratchet higher. Nobles leaning forward in their seats, guards shifting their grips on their weapons. Whatever was about to happen, everyone sensed it would be significant. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself in the way his mentors had taught him so many decades ago. When he opened them again, something fundamental had changed. The humble craftsman was gone, replaced by something far older and more dangerous. With deliberate movements, Marcus reached beneath his collar and drew forth the chain that held his medallion. The griffin blazed in the throne room's light, its wings spread in eternal defiance, its eyes holding the cold fire of stars. Gasps echoed through the chamber as nobles recognized the symbol, whispers spreading like wildfire through the assembled crowd. "The Griffin Guard," someone breathed. And the name carried like a prayer or curse through the crystalline space. Marcus held the medallion high, letting its light catch and reflect the chamber's eternal illumination. "My name is Marcus Chen, last Knight Marshal of the Terran Guard, Keeper of the Flame, sworn protector of the innocent." His voice carried with it the weight of authority earned through blood and sacrifice. "I am the son of warriors, the heir of heroes, the last guardian of humanity's honor." The silence that followed was deafening. Centuries of propaganda had declared the Griffin Guard extinct, their order dissolved, their memory consigned to history. Yet here stood living proof that some legends refused to die. Velthorn slowly rose from his throne, his massive form unfolding like a force of nature. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "Knight Marshal Chen," he said, using the ancient title with formal precision. "The galaxy believed your order extinct." "The galaxy," Marcus replied, his eyes meeting the Emperor's without flinching, "believes many things that are not entirely accurate." A sound rippled through the court, something between nervous laughter and frightened whispers. The idea that their omniscient, all-powerful empire might have been wrong about something so fundamental was almost incomprehensible. And yet, Velthorn continued, you have lived quietly among us for 15 years. A warrior of legend, reduced to mending toys and fixing broken machines. Why? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words with the care of one who knew they would be remembered by history. Because, Your Majesty, true strength is not always about who you can destroy. Sometimes it's about what you choose to protect. He gestured toward where Lirelei stood among the court. Theodore clutched tightly in her arms. The bear's button eyes seemed to gleam with understanding. The griffin crest on his chest catching the light like a promise. Your daughter came to me with a broken toy and a broken heart. In that moment, she wasn't a princess of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. She was just a child who needed help. And I gave her what I could give, not because I sought reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. The Emperor studied him for another long moment, those galaxy eyes searching for deception and finding none. You speak of protecting the innocent, yet your order once stood as humanity's sword and shield against our expansion. You fought us across a dozen star systems. We did, Marcus acknowledged without shame. Just as you fought us. It was war, Your Majesty. Both sides believed they were serving the greater good. And now? What do you believe now? Marcus looked around the throne room, taking in the assembled court with its mixture of fear, fascination, and barely concealed hostility. I believe that the war is over, Your Majesty. I believe that hatred serves no one, and that the galaxy has room for all its children if we choose to make space for each other. He paused, then added quietly, I believe that a child's tears matter more than the pride of empires. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Simple truth spoken in a place where truth was often the rarest commodity. Around the chamber, nobles who had spent their lives in pursuit of power and position found themselves confronted with something they barely remembered, the voice of principle. Uncompromised and unafraid, Velthorn was quiet for so long that some began to wonder if he would speak at all. When he finally did, his words carried the weight of absolute authority. Knight Marshal Marcus Chen, he said formally, your order once stood against us. Your people and ours have bled on 1,000 battlefields. Yet today you have shown our daughter kindness without thought of reward. You have honored the innocent with your service and the court with your truth. The Emperor's expression shifted, becoming something that transcended mere politics or diplomacy. Let it be known throughout the Empire, Velthorn declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and beyond, that the Griffin Guard is not extinct. Let it be known that humanity's greatest protector walks among us still. And let it be known that such courage, such honor, such dedication to the innocent will always find welcome in our realm. He stepped down from the throne, moving with the fluid grace of a predator but the dignity of a ruler. When he stood before Marcus, the height difference between them seemed to shrink, as if will and character could overcome mere physical stature. You have our respect, Knight Marshal. More than that, you have our friendship. Velthorn extended one clawed hand, palm up, in the ancient gesture of equals greeting equals. Will you accept it? Marcus looked at the offered hand, understanding the magnitude of the moment. This was more than personal diplomacy. This was a recognition that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. Humanity, scattered and broken though it was, would no longer be seen as merely a conquered species. They had a champion, a reminder that their greatest virtues had survived even in the darkest of times. He reached out and clasped the Emperor's hand in his own. I accept it, Your Majesty, and I offer my own in return. The court erupted. Some nobles cheered, caught up in the drama of the moment. Others whispered furiously among themselves, already calculating what this new reality would mean for their own positions and plans. Guards stood straighter, unsure whether they were witnessing a historic moment or a dangerous precedent. But in the center of it all, human and dragon stood together, their handshake a bridge across centuries of conflict and mistrust. And watching from the crowd, a small princess hugged her, restored bare and smiled, understanding in the way that children do that something wonderful had just happened, even if she couldn't quite put it into words. From this day forward, Velthorn announced to his court and to the galaxy beyond, Let none say that humanity lacks champions. Let none claim that their heroes are all dust and legend. In our very midst walks proof that some flames can never be extinguished, some oaths never broken. He turned to Marcus, his voice dropping to a more conversational tone. You spoke of making space for all the galaxy's children. Perhaps it is time we made that more than just words. Marcus nodded, understanding the implication. It would be my honor to help in any way I can, Your Majesty. Then stay, Velthorn, said simply, not as our subject, but as our equal. Help us build the galaxy that should have been, where dragons and humans and all the countless other species can thrive together. Looking around the chamber, seeing the mixture of hope and fear, excitement and trepidation in the assembled faces, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense that the future might be brighter than the past. I'll stay, he said, but I keep my shop. There will always be broken things that need mending, and children who need someone to care about their treasures. Velthorn's laugh was like distant thunder, warm and full of genuine amusement. Agreed, Knight Marshal. The galaxy needs its fixers as much as its fighters, and so it was that a broken toy and a child's tears became the catalyst for a new age. Words spread across the Empire with the speed of hyperspace communications. The Griffin Guard lived. Humanity's greatest champion walked among them, and the future held possibilities that no one had dared imagine in years to come. Historians would mark this day as the beginning of the Golden Convergence, when the ancient rivals learned to walk together among the stars. They would speak of grand strategies in cosmic politics, of trade agreements and military alliances, but at its heart, the story would always be simpler than that. It would be about a man who kept his promises, an emperor who chose wisdom over pride, and a little girl who learned that broken things could indeed be made whole again. The galaxy had learned an important truth. Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with armies or fleets, but with the quiet courage of someone willing to dry a child's tears and mend what others would throw away. And Theodore, sitting proudly in Princess Liralay's arms, bore witness to it, all a small guardian, carrying the mark of ancient warriors. Proof that even the humblest of things could carry the weight of worlds.